The book of Genesis, in the beginning, is what Breshit means. It's the first words of Torah, and it starts with the beginning of the world. God, there's nothing, and God creates the whole world, and then God creates people, and then those people, God doesn't like very much, doesn't like what they're up to on earth, and so God decides. And I'm gonna slow us down because these are some of the most famous stories, and also this week's Parsha is Parsha Noach. So that's exciting. But God floods everybody, destroys them, and then they start over, and then there's like a bunch of kids, and then one day there's this couple, and there's this guy named Avram and his wife Sarai. They're like just random people walking around. They don't live where they were from. They've just been moving, and God says, "You, Avram, lech lecha, get up and go to this place that I'm going to show you. That's going to be your homeland. You're going to root yourself there. I'm going to turn you into a great people. I'm going to give you lots of wealth. I'm going to give you lots of land. I'm going to give you lots of kids, and you're going to have lots of descendants." Abraham does all of that with a lot of other side quests and complications. He gets the land, he gets the wealth. He doesn't really get kids, so he tries having a kid with his maid servant Hagar. That doesn't go super well, but he does have a kid named Ishmael. God says, actually, JK, Ishmael is not the person who's going to inherit. Your name is Avraham now, and you're going to have a kid, even though you and your wife are almost 100. Then he has Isaac, Yitzchak. And Yitzchak and Rivka, Isaac and Rebecca get married. This is pretty close, or seems to be, after his dad tries to sacrifice him, but that's a classic. Abraham or Yitzchak and Rivka have twins, Yaakov and Esau. Esau is the oldest, and Yaakov is the one that gets the blessing. You might notice a pattern there. It's never the firstborn. I don't know what that means exactly, but there's a lot to do there. And Yaakov steals the blessing from his brother, flees his house because he thinks his brother is going to kill him, and ends up at his uncle's house, where he falls in love with his second wife, Rachel. His first wife is her sister Leah, he is tricked into marrying her by not checking who she is when they got married. And then they also compete for his love in a lot of different ways, including giving them their maidservants, Zilpah and Bilhah, and together the four of those women and Jacob, I guess, have 13 named children. The second to last boy, Joseph, Rachel's first son, is the next main character for the last 13 chapters of the entire book, longer than almost all of the other people. And he tells the story of going down to Egypt, where he actually establishes himself as very important, and eventually brings the entire Israelite people. His father, named Israel, or Jacob, renamed Israel. The Israelites are his descendants. He brings his whole family to Egypt, and bada bing, bada boom, you might have heard of what happens to us in Egypt. It is not good. The Israelites have their own land in Egypt. It's called Goshen. And the Pharaoh is like, I don't trust these people. I don't know that they'll fight for us. If they get fought, would they even work against us? Who are they? And so the first thing they try is some hard labor to try to keep them from having babies. It doesn't work. It actually has the inverse situation. So then Pharaoh starts killing those babies. That does work, but it also doesn't, in a sense, because they still have babies. One of those babies is very good. His name is Moses. He's put in a little basket, and he's sent down the river, and he's picked up by the princess. All of this happens in the first 2 chapters. So they pack in a ton at the beginning, and then they're just like, okay, a little bit here and there. He grows up in the palace, kills an Egyptian, flees the country, lives in the desert, marries a shepherd, and lives there for probably 40 years at least, and is just wandering around one day shepherding his sheep when he runs into a burning bush, and that burning bush is God, the God of his forefathers, telling him to go back to Egypt and help God free the people. 10 plagues, crossing the sea, they get to the other side of the sea, they escape Egypt. It's crazy. It's only 15 chapters. Highly recommend. It's a great book. And then they're in the desert. They're starting over. They're babies. They're trying to walk to their new land, and they are really actually babies. I wasn't kidding. They start immediately complaining, and God responds by trying to give them some structure. So we get the 10 commandments, we get some internal hierarchy stuff going on. We get God invites Moses up onto the mountain for 40 days. Moses goes up, gets all the instructions for laws, gets all the instructions for how to build God a tiny house on earth, and how to dress when going into God's tiny house. These are very important. Meanwhile, the Israelites are freaking out, and they carve an idol god and pretend that that's the God that took them out of Egypt. Moses gets very upset. It's a very upsetting scene. Moses crashes the tablets, has to go back up, get 2 new ones, comes back down. They build God's tiny house and make Aaron's cute clothes. Aaron is Moses's brother. And that's the end of the book. We're actually here. Noah. That's where we are now. Um, Yeah. And so at the end of the book of, we're in the desert for about a year, we have all our laws and we have God's little tiny hut, but we don't really have a strong priest system. The cult system and sacrifice stuff is not really established yet. So that's what the book of Vayikra is: sacrifices, how to make those sacrifices, how to make a priest holy enough to be the priest, how to eat in a way that is holy. We call it, there's like holiness codes. It's like, but holiness in the sense of like some kind of super moment, like we're never always supposed to be in these places, but there's ways to kind of elevate ourselves spiritually. And that also sometimes comes down to us personally. And all of this is kind of for like when you're in the land. Also, all of this happens in like a day, because it's just kind of like, oh, you're ready. It's like 10 days. Like, oh, you built the house, then you put the people in the house. Here's what you do in the house. End of those 10 days are up. And now we're all still stuck in the desert. So we can be chill, right? Absolutely not. First of all, we have to count everybody. How many people are there going to be? There's more rules and more ways to act. You should also organize yourselves in a particular area for marching around the desert. And by the way, everything is bad. Things are scary. They don't feel like they have enough food. God's mad at them. They're mad at God. Miriam gets a leprosy. They try to go see the land. God, like they actually get to the promised land about 2 years in, and God says, why don't you go check it out and prep? And the spies come back and they're like, actually, never mind, we shouldn't have come. And God's like, they're like, we're just going to die in the desert. We're never going to win. And God's like, well, you are going to win, but you're going to die in the desert. You idiots are going to be here for the next 39 years. That's when it happens. Until that moment in Numbers, we knew, and I always forget this, like we knew that they were going to be there for 40 years, but they did not know that until right here. They don't respond well. People freak out. There's a rebellion where the earth swallows someone, like literally opens up, swallows someone. If you're looking for like wild stories of Torah where you're like, this doesn't make any sense, this is the book for you. There's one point where like a bunch of fire snakes come out and start biting people, and then Moses makes a giant copper snake, and if you look at it, you're healed. There's one where they wanted more meat, so God puts a mile of a circle of meat around them and says, you wanted meat? I hope it comes out of your nose. I'm not actually paraphrasing there. God literally says, you're going to eat meat until it comes out of your nose. Lots of stuff. Miriam and Aaron die. Moses, in his grief, hits a rock, gets kicked out of the land. God says, you're not allowed to go. And then bada bing, bada boom, it's been 40 years and we're almost ready to cross into the promised land, which brings us to Devarim, which is Moses' final speech. Moses, knowing he's not going to go into the promised land, walks up onto the top of a mountain and gives out a final speech to the Israelites. This is his last chance to give them all of the stuff that they need for their journey on their own. It starts with some reminders, Moses' version of recent history. I say Moses' version because it's from the end of the book of Numbers, and it's literally just not the same story. But it's a lot of him complaining and being like, you guys are so rude. Then we get a new version of the 10 Commandments. It's a little updated. We get the Shema. We get like a lot of like, this is how you should feel, like love God, don't turn away, trust things. It's going to be bad. You are going to turn away. Try not to. When you do, turn back. Like a lot of a parent being like, this is my last chance to impart every single thing I have in my mind onto you. Lots of warnings, and then we get some poems to wrap things up from Moses and God to everybody, and then Moses passes the mantle of leadership onto Joshua, walks back up the mountain, and dies. And that is all of Torah.